Hello, we made it to live again this week. Thank you all for being here. If you're here in the Go Live, we're so glad that you're here. If you're watching this recorded, we're also so glad that you took the time to review this video. My name is Elizabeth. If you're a nurse, you're in the right place. So Care for Nurses is a community created to provide nurses in West Virginia with support, advice, and a safe place to talk about anything and everything going on, any ongoing challenges with other nurses going through the same things as you are. So we have many different ways for you to engage. As a reminder, we have our online discussions in the community. It's in our own special closed platform. So this is a secure, private place for you to be able to engage, as well as our regular weekly video calls or our online meetings. And we've got articles and videos just like this with our podcast. So today we have Deb and Kira. They're going to be talking about boundaries, one of my favorite topics. And we're going to try to keep this conversation to about 30 minutes with a prompt end time around 12:15 Eastern. So again, we're glad that you're here. I'm going to pass the baton to Kira and Deb. And real quick, if you have a comment, please feel free to use the chat room here in this platform. Mike, here on the screen with us, will be moderating that as well. So feel free to engage with us using the chat.
Okay.
Awesome. So let's talk about boundaries. So this is kind of a big topic that can be intimidating for people, right? Because they hear, I believe, some common misconceptions, like boundaries are something that you only use for people you don't like, or boundaries are a way to control other people's behavior. So let's talk about that. Boundaries are actually something that you use for yourself. So I hope you like yourself. And boundaries are not a way to control other people's behavior. They're a way to control your own behavior and what you will tolerate from other people. So it's not, don't come near me, I have boundaries, you better be careful, I'm strong. Like, it's not that. It's, if you do this around me and I'm not comfortable with it, I'm strong enough to remove myself from that situation or to say no.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good overview, and I think it's really important for nurses because we have several areas of thinking about boundaries or what we want. We're a little bit of a unique group in the fact that we're so highly female. I did look up some statistics before with this call. When I started nursing, the profession was 97% female. Today, we're 86% female. So numbers are changing, but still, I think there are some special people tend to try to cross any kind of, women are inundated sometimes with people trying to cross boundaries, even though they've set them up, like you said, they know what their limits are. I think between colleagues, patients, family, they have a lot of places where they have to be clear about what do I want, ahead of time rather than being reactive to somebody crossing a boundary.
Absolutely, yeah. If you have your boundaries set up ahead of time, like you're talking about, and it's very, very clear what you want, what you will tolerate to yourself, then you'll have a much easier time saying no when the time comes, which we can go through all of that. We can actually start now with what boundaries are, since we talked about what boundaries aren't. So boundaries, they are a framework for your life. It's really as simple as that. It's, I want my life to look like X, so I will not tolerate Y. So the important thing there is knowing what you want your life to look like. So I recommend like writing it down, like going through, like, this is what I picture my life to be. This is the job that I want. This is the relationship that I want. This is how I want to feel when I, go to sleep at night. I want to be able to sleep peacefully because I am a person with inner peace. You create the I want list. And that's something I encourage all of you to do. Create a list of what you want in your life. And that makes it a lot easier to say no to what you don't want in your life. But go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, but I see your point too, that it's one thing to go in having that strong list in your mind, and another thing to get caught up in the very busy day-to-day work schedule of people pulling on you and pulling on you all day. You know, can you please work a longer shift because we're understaffed? Can you please come in sick, like come in even though you're sick because we're understaffed, you know, or could you please do this for me? And it's something that you're not actually even allowed to do by like hospital standards or something, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. All the time. I think during the pandemic, especially, and I think nurses maybe expanded their boundaries during that time because everyone was being asked to work longer, work harder, have with fewer resources. So, during 2021, I think our boundaries almost disappeared because your supervisors were asking more, your patients were sicker and asking for more. You had less, even though you wanted to have a balance and have family, you felt obligated because of the situation to let those boundaries be crossed. Now that we're coming around back to, sort of more normal times, it's not quite as bad in terms of the acute care of patients. I think this is a great time to, like you said, step back and say, what do I want? Do I still want to work 12-hour shifts 5 days a week? Do I want that overtime? Do I want to be able to say, no, this is what I'm going to do? And I think when you cross your boundaries too often, you have to say, what's the bigger picture? Like, okay, they've asked me to work, an extra shift, 2 extra shifts for the past 6 or 8 weeks. Is a time that I'm crossing my boundaries so often it's time for a different job or look for something to go on to push you to a bigger decision. So, which is hard. It's hard, to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you were talking about too, this profession has so many people with high empathy. And it's like, well, I want to be a kind person who is caring, right? I want to be a caring nurse. So this fits with my boundary to give in and say yes a lot because, a caring person would, right? And that can be something that really trips you up. So you have to remember in that, like your framework that you've set of like, okay, I do want to be a caring person, but within this framework, right? If not, your framework goes from this to like, and then you just feel like life has like just trampled you, and everything that you do is for everybody else. You never have any time for yourself, and you're just completely exhausted, right? And then like fatigue sets in and burnout sets in. So really, like, even if one of your I wants is I want to be a good caring nurse, right? Then set some boundaries to protect yourself from that burnout. And one of those is don't say yes all the time, even though it would be a caring thing to do. Ultimately, it's not, right?
I think a real critical area for nurses too is setting boundaries with patients. I mean, as you said, nurses are caring, they're empathetic, they want to help people. But I think, again, with the rough times that we've had, patients are needier, sometimes just more demanding, and sometimes inappropriate in their demands. So unless you have a strong sense of this is what I want to care for this person, I don't want to feel uncomfortable caring for this person because of his or her interactions or what he's asking me to do, anything like that. Yeah. That's something that kind of sneaks up on a nurse. I think you aren't going to work thinking, the patients are going to also make some inappropriate demands, and how do I clearly set the boundaries ahead of time? You need to be a strong, competent nurse. And the newer nurses, novice nurses with less experience, it hasn't happened quite so often to them. So they may not have they never imagined it probably would, because you go in with an ideal that I'm a nurse, I'm going to help you, and everybody's going to be grateful I helped you. And then you find sometimes patients aren't grateful, or sometimes they're inappropriate. And how do you ahead of time say, I know what the boundaries are, where I should stop? It's hard sometimes to even know the boundary.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. So you spend some time. I I highly recommend doing this exercise of I want my life to look like X, so I will not tolerate Y. And the more detail that you get in that, you can even go into, you can separate into categories, right? Like in relationships, I want my life to look like X, so I will not tolerate Y. In the hospital, right? At work, I want my life to look like X, so I will not tolerate Y, right? And maybe one of those things is I want my life to look like I am a nurse who is treated with respect, so I will not tolerate disrespect, right?
That's a great way to put it. Yes. Yeah. I think
that will help you then when you feel like, whoa, this person is treating me with disrespect just because I'm here to take care of them. No, I'm not going to tolerate any disrespect here.
Mm-hmm.
Or, they're asking for things outside of my job description, and I want my life to look like I'm a good nurse.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't include being anybody's slave, right?
I've had patients ask me to, tie their shoes when they're perfectly capable of doing it themselves, or asking me to do, just menial tasks, in their room that are really not part of my professional job. And sometimes you go, well, there's nobody else here, and you'll do it because there isn't help. But then you walk away feeling like you were disrespectful, and that's not how I want to be. So, yeah.
Exactly. And the result of that is then you have a harder time asserting yourself in other areas of your life too, because you were showing yourself, hey, I'm somebody who will bend my rules for others all the time. It's just kind of what I do, and you start bending your rules in more and more areas, and it makes you respect yourself less because of that.
Mm-hmm.
When you set clear boundaries for yourself and you keep them, you respect yourself more, because then you see yourself as somebody who does keep her promises, right? I want my life to look like this, so I will not tolerate that. I stuck to that. I am somebody who can be trusted.
Mm-hmm.
You teach yourself, you can trust yourself to take care of yourself and protect yourself. That increases your confidence, and that increases your ability to continue to enforce these boundaries.
I think what we're saying is good information, but I worry sometimes too when nurses go home, they probably have to set some boundaries with their family sometimes too. Obviously you definitely love and are empathetic towards your family, but after a 12-hour shift and you come home, and whether it's your husband, whether it's your kids, whether it's your mother-in-law, somebody may be making a demand on you that is beyond what you want, or you might feel disrespected that, okay, I worked 12 hours and, my mother-in-law showed up and expects me to take her somewhere or cook for her, clean her house, whatever. And it's very difficult to set your boundaries ahead of time when you've been doing it all day at work, and now you have to establish some guidelines for home too.
Yeah, that's why, again, I definitely recommend setting those guidelines, those boundaries for each individual area of your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm at work, this is what the framework that I want to live in, this is what it should be, right? And we're not talking about ridiculous things, I want to be, I want to be treated like a queen, and I want everybody to bow to me and all that, right? We're just we're just saying, I want to be treated with respect, and while I'm caring for you, I want you to be kind to me, I want to be able to work good hours and not always ask to do more and more and more and all that. Well, same thing at home, right? So at home, you're treating people with kindness. You are treating them with respect. You are taking care of them, right? Don't you deserve the same thing, right? So all of those, right? I want my home life to look like I am treated with respect. Therefore, I will not tolerate Y, right? And Y is treating me with disrespect. Somebody treats me with disrespect, I'll tell them that was disrespectful. Don't do that anymore, And granted, when it's kids, you have to do it a lot.
Yeah, kids are. It's much. But honestly, we're not going to get into parenting. It's a little different situation with kids because the boundaries are changing all the time as they develop. Your boundaries change with that, with what you'll allow them to do and what you won't allow them to do.
And if I can kind of interject here for a minute. So I hear some wonderful language and conversation of, okay, establishing boundaries and I want to be respected. That's kind of like an overall, I think everybody innately wants to be respected. It's just part of our being. What I think for me is sitting back and identifying what respect looks like, because respect can be demonstrated in different ways. So when, I heard you talking about journaling, for me, I started saying, well, how do I want to be respected? What are some ways that can translate? And for me, I may come up with a list of, well, clearly there's the obvious ones, such as using kind words, allowing people to yell at you, right? And what that looks like. Yeah. But also, sometimes there's an unspoken respect that may need to be there as well. That looks very different in a home life versus a work-life balance. But sometimes there's just a professionalism in the job where there's level of respect that's unspoken or unwritten. So really just defining what, kind of break it down to a more detailed view of what does that mean for me, because then that's going to give you additional ways to recognize what you would not tolerate versus just the language. And then on top of that, and I think this is my biggest question that I kind of want to pivot the conversation to is, okay, we've identified that, but how do we actually establish the boundary? How can we respond to someone before a boundary is crossed, or if the boundary is crossed? Because one of the things that I like to do in my life is not everybody necessarily understands they're disrespecting your time or space or person. And so I like to make it clear of what my expectations are, kind of coming into a situation of, okay, here's what I can do for you. Here's what I can't do for you, or with you, or for you, right? And so kind of verbalizing that on the front end, I think that's one of the big strategies for me, is establishing that on the front end, because then that kind of makes the communication clear and distinct. So when that boundary is crossed, you can address it. Hey, I kind of said, we've already talked about what I can and cannot do for you. I kind of feel that this has crossed a little bit of a boundary, and you can have that conversation before hopefully it escalates.
Yeah.
But what happens if they do cross a boundary? I'd love to hear your all's opinions about some proper ways to respond to a situation versus maybe reacting.
Well, I think in a little bit, it depends on the situation. Like say, and I was thinking of another place where nurses particularly have to set boundaries is with physicians or with coworkers. And so let's say, for example, your coworkers, one of them tends to tease you about something, whether it's, your red hair or your 5 extra pounds or whatever. And it gets to the point where and maybe the first time you felt like you're going to let it go, but it gets to the point that this coworker continually makes funny remarks about you. That's an individual situation where you have to step up and say, and probably in private say, I don't appreciate what you're saying about me. You're disrespecting me. You might think this is funny, but really this is hurting my feelings. So please don't make those remarks, and try to handle it right there. That's establishing your boundary that you don't want her to cross that line again. So that's an individual way of doing it. I think sometimes in an environment, and I'll go to a physician example, where there's a physician that does not treat nurses in general with as much respect, and and obviously there's some power dynamics going on there where, the physician brings more money to the hospital. He has more control over the patients. But if he's doing this on a routine basis and more than one of you feel that he is either, too loud, using swear words, not treating you nicely, you have to look at yourself as a group and say, we need to take action on this. We need to go through the channels to say, we're not being respected. He's crossing our boundaries more in a group setting. And that can be done, obviously, when the group has decided that it's a problem. They can do this on a maybe not quite public basis, but where everybody listens and says, we're not going to tolerate this behavior anymore.
Yeah, I mean, really, it's what you guys like both said, right? Like the way to enforce them is to first make them clear, just like you do, like, you know, rules with kids, just like teachers do in schools, like offices do with employees, right? These are the rules we're going to follow. So like Liz was saying, like start with, you know, these are the rules we're going to follow, right? This is what you can expect from me. Right. And this is what won't work for me. That way, like you were saying, then if it does happen, you can, I actually believe in addressing it right away, not getting to the point where like, oh, I've tolerated that so much that I can't take it anymore. Okay. More like, whoa, hey, I mean, wait, that just showed me like disrespect, or, you know, I felt disrespected when you said that. Can you please just not say that anymore? Thank you. I'd appreciate it. Right. And it could be that easy. I don't think anybody's like trying to, you know, be outwardly disrespectful. And if you call them out on it, especially if other people are around, if you call them on it in that way, like, whoa, you know, can you please not do that anymore? That made me uncomfortable. Right. Usually people will adjust for that. If they don't, right, then even more so, like, hey, I've asked you already. Like, I made it clear that makes me uncomfortable. Don't do that anymore, right? And then it depends like where you are, right? If you're at, you know, in a work situation and they still don't stop, then you use your, like you were saying, the proper channels involved to get those consequences in place for them, right? It doesn't have anything to do with you anymore. It's let somebody else take care of that, and you continue with your day.
And I think in the work setting, it's important to remind yourself, unfortunately, you know, document. If you have an interaction that was unpleasant, even if it's just a note to self, the date, you know, Susie and I discussed this, I asked her not to call me flirtatious or whatever, and then just a document, a log to yourself, a journal to yourself, and the same, or if you're going with it as a group, the more documentation you could have, and simple documentation. It doesn't have to be taping somebody or anything else. But as you write your notes to yourself, first of all, it's good documentation for the record. It also makes you feel a little better that you're doing something or talking to yourself about, why is this bothering me? So.
Yeah, but I would just like say, don't let it like build up so much that you're just like writing in your, you know, like, I'm going to document the heck out of you, you know, like they don't really, you know, care. It's bring those consequences, you know, make them feel called out. That made me uncomfortable. I'm not comfortable with that. Don't do that anymore.
Okay. Mike, do you have something?
Yeah, I think, you know, part of this is like recognizing it and writing out what your own boundaries are. I think that's powerful. But then in actual, the kind of the role playing of what's the language, because like if someone's not used to doing this, it's like, how do you say it without it like coming off too harsh?
Yeah,
you know. And like one of my favorite things, I don't use this enough, but it's like when I have to say something that's hard to say, like, hear my heart, you know, using some kind of softening language when you say it. But I think the great thing that we have here with especially the weekly groups, the live calls, it's like, if you have a specific situation with a patient, a physician, whatever, you can bring that to a group and get direct feedback from other nurses, because like you almost need to like know what the words are. You almost need to role play it with somebody before you do it sometimes.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Yeah, it is. The groups would be very good for that for you, especially the novice nurses who have not been in these situations, and they didn't realize that the real world, there'd be some tough cookies out there that they might have to deal with. So that's a great point.
Yeah, just like if you were to call your best friend and say, hey, I need to hash this out. I need you to kind of give me a bird's eye view or opinion of this particular situation. what I hear you saying, Mike, is this is the perfect place to get that feedback from people who have walked this and lived this and have some firsthand knowledge and can do that role play or that talking it out. I think it's a great suggestion. And to kind of piggyback off of that, I think that another thing that I was thinking is when you said kind of soften your language, coming up with, so when Kira was talking about journaling, kind of make a list of things that maybe you hear other people say. I was like, "Ooh, I really like how they handled that situation," and kind of jot that down. Ladies, I'm going to ask you a really tough question, and I don't know if this is something that can be answered in the next 5 minutes, but we've talked about respect. We've talked about communication and more relationship, whether it's with a boss, a supervisor, a physician, a spouse. But what about the job saying you have to work because we don't have anybody else to work, and you've clearly put in tremendous amount of time. Maybe you're exhausted and you know that it's not really safe for you to work right now. Maybe you have something that's very important to you on the home front that you've committed to attend, but you're worried about your job being at jeopardy if you say no, right? So that's your worry or your fear. But then also telling your supervisor, the person that cuts your paycheck or makes your hours, no. Like how do we cross that bridge, right? You know, how do we establish boundaries when you don't feel that you have the right to do that? And clearly you do, but you may not feel that way.
And you want us to answer that in 4 minutes, huh?
And maybe this is something that you can speak on for a few minutes, but I would encourage anybody who's on here or listening to this after it's recorded to kind of maybe put some of those thoughts in the comments so we can continue this conversation, because this is clearly something
that's a big one.
Yeah.
We need everyone to chime in on that one.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I would think the more clear you are in your details, like you were talking about, the easier it will be to identify these things when it happens and to build up that confidence to be able to say no when even that level that makes you feel powerless comes at you with something that makes you feel uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, right.
That's a good time to remind yourself they're really no powerful than I am. We're all people, right? And they also have to answer to, the code of conduct here, or, whatever workplace rules. There's a law here also that protects me, right? I'm protected by a law that says I don't have to work, all these extra hours, or if I'm sick or anything like that. So it's perspective in a big way. It's, hey, they're really not any more powerful than me. And I deserve, what is my right to. So it's just being able to say that, like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
I don't have to, right?
Yeah, and being prepared helps you set that boundary. I mean, the West Virginia Nurse Practice Act has a huge special section just on when and how to reject or accept or reject an assignment or an extra shift. And then also your institution will have specifically those. So it's a little dull and boring, but it's worth it to read those kind of things if you find yourself continually in that situation. So you're aware of your right to set your boundary. You're aware of what the repercussions are. I don't think institutions vary a lot from the West Virginia Nurse Practice Act, but I think it's a good thing to reinforce. Especially, and it's going to happen. Sometimes you are going to give in, or sometimes
we're all human.
Yeah, we're all human. That's going to happen. Or you start to decide, maybe for the better good, I'll do it. But knowing how to set the boundaries so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Stay informed. Be informed about your rights and your responsibilities.
Yeah. And really, too, I think we kind of hit on the power behind enforcing the boundaries, right, is knowing that we're just as powerful as everybody else.
Yes.
Right? People like to run over the boundaries of people who feel smaller than them.
Yes.
Right.
Good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, no, I'm not any smaller than this person. I have every right to want what I want in my life, just like they have every right to want what they want in their life.
Yeah.
This is my framework, and I will say, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with that. You know, really, it can be that simple.
And
Well, I
not
hope
having to give a long explanation. You know, I feel like
Right.
sometimes we feel the need to, you know, hey, I'm so sorry, I've got this, this, and this going on, or I'm not feeling very, you know, we want to give this reasoning, and sometimes it's okay to just say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not available, and
Mhm.
just leave it at that. I think is a valid point as well.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. And you really don't even have to say sorry. We're also used to saying, you know, sorry, sorry.
Yeah.
That's
You
true.
know, say,
That's
"Thank
true.
you."
And women do it more often than men. That's it. We do.
Yeah, yeah. But you could say, you know, instead, thanks for that opportunity, you know, but I'm not available for it this time. You know, it's maybe as simple as that.
Okay.
Excellent. Yay. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you all again. Another one just flew right on by. I can't believe the 30 minutes is already up, but again, some great points to talk about. We are going to be posting this recording in the recorded section. We're also going to be attaching in the description of the recording the article that is being written about boundaries by Kira. And we encourage you to also comment below underneath the video. Maybe you have a thought or an experience you'd like to share. Please do that. We'd love to engage in the conversation there. And like Mike said, if you have a very specific scenario that maybe is reoccurring or just recently happened and you're really not sure how to address it, or you just want to make sure how you addressed it was the best way, you know, whatever is going on, we would definitely encourage you to come into one of the group meetings where you can talk to some of the nurses. Deb runs those, so she's very easy to talk to and would love to see you all there.
Oh, yeah, I'd love to talk to you.
So again, if anything comes up, post it online, send us an email, refer your fellow nurses, ask them, hey, have you signed up for this amazing community for Care for Nurses? If not, have them, just direct them to us. We thank you very much for being here today, and we will see you in about 2 weeks for another one. We're going to start having some guest speakers trickle in, so just keep an eye on the topics forthcoming. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Hey, all right. Yeah, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.